Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a truly fascinating mission ahead of us today.
You really do.
Yeah, we are going to explore this profound, historically significant text that describes the actual creation of the universe.
Right.
Specifically, we're looking at a famous sermon delivered by Imam Ali. And he's this towering historical and religious figure from the 7th century.
Famously celebrated for his incredible eloquence and, his really deep philosophical insights.
Exactly. Now, before we jump in, we want to make our objective very clear to you, the listener. Our goal today isn't to endorse a specific theology or, preach any particular religious doctrine.
No, not at all.
Right. Instead, we are here for an impartial, deeply curious exploration of the ideas. We want to look at the incredibly vivid elemental imagery and the wholly unique perspectives contained right within this original source material.
And, the historical context is part of what makes this text so captivating to begin with.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking about a description of the cosmos originating in the 7th century, yet it utilizes these conceptual frameworks that feel remarkably modern.
Yeah, it really does.
It takes us on this conceptual journey, starting with the pure, tranquil state of divine will, and then it plunges us into a violently chaotic cosmic storm of winds and primordial waters.
And then brings us out into the perfect, silent clockwork of the celestial sky.
Exactly. It is basically a masterclass in trying to put language to the unconceptualizable.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the contrast this text sets up is just jarring in the best way possible.
It really is.
Usually when we humans think about the act of creation, we have this baked-in expectation of it being an incredibly messy physical process.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, think of it anytime you try to build something, even something as simple as like a wooden birdhouse in your backyard. You might have a vision in your head, sure.
But getting to the final product is a whole different story.
Right. It involves a massive learning curve. It involves trial and error, a lot of physical labor, half-finished rough drafts, and inevitably a fair amount of frustration.
Yeah, you make a mistake, you pivot, you try again.
Exactly. It's sweaty. It's noisy.
Human creation is fundamentally a struggle against our materials. We are constantly wrestling physical things into the shape we want them to take, and the material is, constantly pushing back.
Pushing back, yeah. But then you step into the world of this specific theological text, and suddenly that messy, noisy workshop is completely erased.
Completely gone.
The text focuses heavily on the unique nature of divine creation, and it does so by focusing almost entirely on what the Creator didn't have to do.
Which is such a fascinating approach.
It is. Listen how this is framed. It says God initiated creation definitively and originally. But it says this was done without forethought or pondering, without utilizing prior experience, without physical movement.
And without any mental agitation.
Yes, without any mental agitation. That is the phrase that really anchors the whole concept for me.
That phrase is really the cornerstone of the text's philosophy. It's a classic example of what philosophers call the via negativa,
The via negativa.
Yeah.
Right. Describing the ultimate reality by stating what it is not.
Exactly. By systematically removing every human element of creation, the pondering, the physical movement, the anxiety base it, the text isolates a state of absolute profound stillness.
Which, completely contradicts how our brains operate.
Oh, totally.
When I'm building that birdhouse, I experience a ton of mental agitation. I get anxious about whether the wood will splinter when I cut it. I pace around trying to figure out if I measured the angles right.
Right, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. The text goes completely out of its way to define this monumental universal act of creation by what is absent. So why is the concept of a totally perfectly calm, almost static mind so crucial to the author's specific description of the universe's origin?
Well, because mental agitation only exists when there is a gap between your idea and your execution.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, you experience anxiety building your birdhouse because you don't actually know how the wood will behave until you run it through the saw. You are reacting to the material in real time.
Right.
What's fascinating here is that this ancient text paints a picture of ultimate omniscience where that gap is entirely eliminated. It specifically notes that the Creator thoroughly knew the limits, boundaries, intricate connections, and intricacies of all things before they even began.
Before they even began. So before a single atom is moved or a single physical element is brought into existence, the entire blueprint of the cosmos is already solved.
Solved, yes. Furthermore, the text states that God allotted things to their appropriate times reconciled their disparities, and implanted their inherent dispositions.
Reconciling disparities, I love that.
It's a beautiful way of saying that every potential physical conflict in the universe was harmonized in the divine mind beforehand.
So no rough drafts.
No rough drafts of the universe at all. Because if you perfectly comprehend the end result and the deepest inherent nature of every single element before you begin, there's no problem left to solve.
Wow.
That is a creation born of absolute undisturbed certainty.
That paints a majestic, almost hauntingly quiet picture of the Creator. But, and this is a big but, if the divine state of mind is defined by total stillness and a complete lack of physical agitation.
The actual physical mechanism of the universe forming in this text is the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. If the mind is still, the workshop is a tempest.
It is absolute deafening pandemonium.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We transition from this silent divine will directly into what can only be described as a primordial churn.
A primordial churn, yeah.
The text talks about the creation of the atmosphere, the splitting of the horizons, and the fashioning of strata of air. And then it introduces water.
But we aren't talking about a calm, reflective lake here.
No, not at all. It describes surging, accumulating water that is literally carried on the back of a violent storm force wind.
And notice the mechanics of that very first wind. Its designated job is to hold the massive volume of water back.
Right.
It binds the water. It's a containment force. The space beneath is an expansive void. The water above is pouring forth in a surging mass, and this violent storm wind is acting as a cosmic dam, preventing the water from just infinitely falling.
Okay, so you have this cosmic dam, but then a second wind is introduced into the equation.
Yes, the sterile wind.
Right. The text calls it a sterile or barren wind. It says this wind has a constant continuous presence, a distant origin, and fierce currents.
And this sterile wind is explicitly commanded to agitate that massive volume of surging water.
We've officially gone from calm divine will to a cosmic washing machine.
That's a great way to put it.
The text says it churns the water like the churning of a milk skin. It drives the front of the water onto its back until swells rise up and throw up accumulated foam. And looking at this milk skin analogy, it's incredibly earthy and grounded. It tells me that the author is purposely using the imagery of violent industrial friction. It's not magic, it's mechanics.
That distinction is crucial. This is an ancient text leaning entirely into mechanical, physical forces to explain the divine process.
Yeah.
And to really appreciate the depth of that, we have to look closely at the terminology. Let's start with the sterile wind. In the natural earthly world, a wind that is fertile brings rain clouds.
Right. It brings weather.
It carries pollen and seeds. It facilitates life and growth. A sterile, barren wind does absolutely none of those things. It acts purely as a raw, destructive mechanical force.
Just raw power.
Exactly. It is a sledgehammer. It exists only to agitate, disrupt, and apply immense pressure.
And that sledgehammer effect is exactly why the milk skin analogy is so brilliant.
Oh, definitely.
For anyone who might not be familiar with ancient nomadic agriculture, a milk skin was a sewn leather bag filled with animal milk. To make butter, you don't just gently stir it with a spoon.
No, you really have to work it.
Right. You hang that heavy leather skin from a tripod, and you violently shake it, beat it, and turn it back and forth. You subject the liquid inside to intense, violent friction.
And the author is brilliantly scaling down an unfathomable, terrifying cosmic event into an everyday human action.
Something a 7th century audience would instantly understand.
Precisely. When you violently churn that milk skin, what happens on a molecular level? The physical agitation causes the fat molecules to smash into each other.
Right.
They separate from the liquid, they coagulate, and they transform from a fluid state into something thick, solid, and substantial. They become butter.
So this text is essentially describing fluid dynamics on a universal scale.
Basically, yes.
The sterile wind relentlessly drives the primordial water onto itself, creating massive friction, and the physical byproduct of all that violent cosmic agitation is this accumulated foam.
It's all about that foam.
Well, yeah, because if the byproduct of all that violent friction is foam, the next logical question is, what do you do with a universe full of foam?
You build with it.
Right, because according to this text, that foam is about to become the fundamental building material of reality. We move from the cosmic storm into the actual construction phase.
Which is quite the pivot.
It is. The text says that this accumulated foam is raised up into a vast open air and an expansive void. And from this foam, the seven heavens are fashioned.
The transition from chaotic liquid to structural architecture is one of the most conceptually fascinating leaps in the entire sermon.
But this is where I have to challenge the structural logic of the text. Because you, listening right now, are probably thinking the exact same thing I was when I first read this.
Okay, what were you thinking?
Wait, the text is literally saying the massive canopies of the heavens are built out of sea foam. And further down, it says these heavens are supported without pillars and without nails to bind them together.
Right.
To the human mind, to our practical engineering brains, building a roof out of foam sounds incredibly fragile. It sounds precarious.
It sounds impossible.
Right. We like load-bearing walls. We like steel beams. How does building a massive pillarless canopy out of sea foam fit into the idea of a perfectly ordered permanent universe?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you are applying human engineering limitations to divine physics.
Oh.
The structural integrity of this universe doesn't come from physical scaffolds. It doesn't rely on the heavy, clumsy pillars or the iron nails that human beings have to use to keep their roofs from caving into gravity.
So what holds it up?
The integrity comes entirely from the invisible divine command that binds them. The lack of pillars isn't a sign of structural weakness. It is a demonstration of absolute power.
Oh, wow.
The firmament stays up because it was commanded to stay up, suspended perfectly in the void.
And the text gives us a truly mind-bending description of what that looks like. It says the lowest heaven is fashioned as a contained wave, and the highest heaven is made into a protected ceiling and an elevated canopy.
A contained wave.
Yes. I want to zero in on that phrase, a contained wave.
Yeah.
That feels like a massive paradox. I mean, a wave, by its very definition, is an expression of kinetic energy. It moves, it crashes, it rolls, and eventually it dissipates.
It is a profound paradox, and honestly, it mirrors concepts we now discuss in modern physics, like the conservation of energy or potential energy.
Really? How so?
Well, the lowest heaven is fashioned from the foam of those violently agitated waters. It retains the memory of its origin.
Okay.
It retains the fluid, dynamic nature of the primordial storm, but it is contained. It is perfectly restrained by the divine will. Imagine a massive ocean wave paused perfectly at its highest crest,
Oh, wow.
holding all of that devastating kinetic energy in a state of permanent suspension.
It's not a rigid, dead ceiling made of stone or concrete. It's a vibrant, living architecture of held energy. It completely changes how you visualize the sky.
Yeah.
It's an ocean suspended by a command.
And that living architecture provides the perfect framework for the final stage of creation.
Right, because the structural framing of the universe is now built and hanging miraculously in the void. But an empty house isn't a home, it needs lights.
And a static universe isn't functional, it needs movement.
Exactly. The text shifts focus to adorning the heavens. It says that after the heavens were raised, they were adorned with the ornaments of stars and the brilliant light of piercing meteors.
The ornaments of stars.
Yeah, and then it states that a radiant lamp, which represents the sun, and an illuminating moon were set into motion. Crucially, they exist within a revolving orbit, a moving ceiling, and a rotating firmament.
The language deliberately shifts here from the violent and linear to the precise and circular.
So what does this all mean when we look at the whole picture? When I track the progression of this text, I see a massive evolution in the physics being described.
Oh, absolutely.
We started the physical creation with violent straight-line forces. We had a sledgehammer wind blowing fiercely across a wide-open void, violently crashing into surging water. It was chaotic.
Very chaotic.
But now, in this final stage, we are suddenly talking about revolving orbits and rotating firmaments. It makes me think of a combustion engine.
A combustion engine, that is a fantastic way to look at it. How so?
Well, inside a car engine, you have these incredibly violent, explosive, chaotic bursts of fire and pressure happening inside the cylinders.
Right, it's just raw power.
It's pure destructive energy. But the genius of the engine is that it traps those chaotic explosions and forces them to push pistons in a specific rhythm.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, it takes linear violent chaos and harnesses it to turn a crankshaft, creating smooth, predictable forward rotation. It feels like this text is doing the exact same thing on a cosmic scale.
That analogy perfectly captures the grand synthesis of the text. Divine order didn't just freeze the water and stop the wind to create a static, lifeless piece.
Right, because it's a moving ceiling.
Exactly. As the text explicitly notes, the sky is a moving ceiling and a rotating firmament. The ultimate takeaway here is that divine order doesn't eliminate chaotic motion, it harnesses it.
It harnesses it.
Yes. It takes the raw, explosive energy of the cosmic churn, much like your combustion engine, and organizes it into beautiful, perpetual, predictable cycles.
The chaotic churning of the milk skin has been resolved into the perfect, ticking precision of the cosmos. The storm becomes the rhythm.
The radiant lamp of the sun and the illuminating moon aren't just haphazardly thrown into the sky. They are meticulously set in motion within a revolving orbit. The wild kinetic energy of the sterile wind is finally given a permanent, rhythmic purpose.
It is such a breathtaking arc. Let's bring this deep dive to a close and briefly recap the incredible journey we just took through Imam Ali's description of creation.
Let's do it.
We began with this profound, almost alien concept of an effortless architect, a creator who operates with absolute omniscience, acting without any mental agitation, without rough drafts, and without the physical sweat of trial and error, because every disparity was reconciled before the work even began.
And then, from that profound stillness, we plunge straight into the primordial churn, watching as sterile, barren winds acted as cosmic mechanical forces, agitating massive oceans of water until they threw up the foundational foam of the universe.
And from that fragile seeming foam, we saw the construction of the seven heavens. It's an architecture entirely devoid of pillars or nails, defined instead by beautiful, physics-defying paradoxes like a contained wave.
It's so poetic.
It really is. And finally, we watch that raw, explosive elemental power get harnessed like a cosmic combustion engine into the precise, predictable celestial mechanics of suns, moons, and stars ticking away in perfect rotating orbits.
The text ultimately offers a remarkable synthesis of physics, poetry, and theology.
And that is exactly why, whether you are prepping for a deep-level university theology class, you're a student of ancient literature, or you are just deeply curious about how our ancestors understood the world, a text like this is so incredibly valuable.
It really is.
It offers us a breathtaking framework to visualize the ultimate tension in our universe, the tension between the chaotic, destructive forces of nature and the precise, invisible laws that keep the whole thing perfectly balanced and suspended above our heads.
It fundamentally changes your perspective, gives you a reason to look up at the night sky and see both the memory of a violent storm and the reality of perfect mathematical order working in tandem.
But before we let you go today, there is one final, provocative thought that I want you to mull over. Something for you to explore on your own that builds heavily on exactly what we've been talking about.
This text certainly leaves you with plenty of lingering questions.
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
We talked at the very beginning about how, before a single atom moved, the Creator implanted their inherent dispositions into all things and thoroughly knew their limits and intricate connections.
Right.
It was the ultimate blueprint, finished before the first breath of wind.
The absolute zero gap between intention and reality.
Exactly. So if that is true, if every single drop of that surging primordial water and every single violently destructive gust of that sterile wind already had its exact disposition and its precise physical boundaries programmed into it before the universe even existed.
Ah, I see exactly where you're going with this.
Were we ever actually reading a description of chaos during that storm?
Wow.
Or is what we call chaos the violent churning of the winds